Hi, welcome to Seeking Utopia, conversations about our biggest dreams. I'm Tosca DiMatteo, founder of Tosca Coaching and Consulting, and this is Margot Schulman, founder of Choose Love Revolution.
Woo!
Hey, so this is actually week number 2. We did this last week in very different times. And here we are on the Friday of election week with some more clarity, some still uncertainty. And so I think, politics is really kind of front and center, and how that plays a role in our lives and what that means about how we're pursuing our own dreams or how we're feeling about our own dreams. And so I think we're going to end up talking about all of these things in play. But I think at the end of the day, no matter what road we wind down, we definitely want to bring it back to how do we support you? How do we come back to tools and tips for how we can continue to pursue our biggest dreams, even in the hardest of times? So, yeah, Margot, we just talked about that. So anything to add to how we want to use this time to support people today?
Well, something I know that we want to touch on, if not dive into pretty deeply, is the idea of power, our relationship to our own power, the stories we create about people that are in power, who may have power over us, both in personal relationships as well as work relationships, and then of course in politics.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about power too, right? And I think that I don't know, the theme that comes up to me is we just have to continue to speak truth to power. Mm-hmm. That when we see things that are destructive, whether that's on a national stage or whether that's in your own organization, that we all have the power to speak truth to power. And it doesn't matter what title you hold. It doesn't matter where you are in the world or what you're doing, because we all have a voice, and that it's powerful to use it, and you just don't know who's listening, right? You just don't know the impact that you can have, even if it's planting a seed of an idea, even if it's saying something in just the slightly different way that somebody can then actually take in. It's even though we may have been in the same rooms and had the same conversations, that one time where we say it differently, or somebody's in a different headspace and can absorb it and say, oh crap, yeah, we have to do something about that. That's the kind of thing, to me, it's about not giving up, right? Not being relentless, and being aware of the power that we do hold, because sometimes we just don't even acknowledge it. We don't even believe it ourselves. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there is a lot in there, what you just said. That's really important to emphasize. And I mean, the first thing that comes to me often with conversations about this is that it's one thing for us to say you have to speak truth to power, which I 100% agree with. What comes up for me, though, when I hear that is that's scary, right? That's a scary thing to do. And so what do we need? What do we each need in ourselves? Oh, my kitten is in the background. She has no problem speaking truth to power. You should.
Oh, nice. I couldn't even hear her, but now I just saw her. That's awesome. I love
it. What do we need? What tools can we use, or what do we need to shore up in ourselves to feel safe enough to speak truth to power, right? I mean, yeah, I think about a client I had recently who was being really mistreated in her job, but she was scared to speak up about it because she didn't want to lose her job, right? I mean, we've all been in that, most of us probably have been in that situation where you need your job. Like you speak up to someone who's a bully, or maybe they're not even a bully. Maybe they're just, blind to the reality of how they're treating other people, or they're not paying attention, or whatever's going on in their life. But you speak up to them in a particular way and they might get really mad, right? And if they do have power over you, then they might fire you or, demote you or whatever it is. And so, recognizing that the reality that it's complicated and that, it takes inner work in order to be able to do that important outer work. Again, whether it's in a personal relationship or work or a job, or in the public sphere and going on a march, or having a conversation with someone who disagrees with you politically, or even I think in this like bring it back into politics a little bit, like it takes courage and strength to question your own beliefs. I think that's been missing. That gets lost, and it's been lost a lot lately. It's easier for people to just let someone else tell them what to think. It's easier to watch a news, show, and they tell you what to think, and you're like, okay, I'm going to think that because they have power. They seem to know what they're talking about. They've done the research, right? And I'm just going to do that because I got other things to think about, or I don't want to question my own beliefs. This makes me feel safe. Feeling like part of a group, that makes me feel safe. And so I'm just going to do that. And yeah, we have to question our own beliefs, our own stories, our own actions all the time. All of us do.
Yeah, I mean, all of that. It just resonates so much, and I'm like building all this energy inside about like, oh my God, yes, let's talk about like speaking truth to power, and what that means, and that some people have more privilege than others to be able to do it, right? And that at the end of the day, there is a lot of consequence. There is risk. I don't want to say that there's not risk, especially to your point about people having power over and can make decisions. And I think that, first and foremost, I would say that there is finesse, right? Like there is finesse to doing that in a way that is constructive, that is in a way that is not shaming, that is in a way that builds trust. And so some of that is like practice and failure. Some of that is experimentation. It's kind of like we almost have to be like mini psychologists, of which I am not, admittedly, but like we kind of have to understand, well, how does this person typically react, and what has been successful in the past, and like, is now the moment to have this conversation, or do I actually need to wait until the emotions are lower to actually address this? And I think of one of the very first times in my career that I really had to stand up for myself. And I don't remember all the details, but it was a few years out of grad school, and I was on the phone in a conference call. My manager was on this call, and he was like with this other party, this external party, and I did not like the way I was being treated. Like I felt very disrespected, and I was like fuming. And I came back the next day, and I just knew, like, that I had to say something. I had to stand up for myself in this moment. And look, and I think we have to choose our moments about what battles are you fighting, what matters. But I knew this was one of them, because it was like, there's no freaking way that I'm gonna like put this under the rug and let him think that it's okay to treat me this way. Otherwise, like it could happen repeatedly. And I walked into, and I said, like, I need to speak with you. Like I gave him a heads up. Hey, I like really want to speak with you. And I go into his office. And I told him how I felt. I was like, I was not okay with that. Like,
Mhm.
I felt very disrespected, and like, I'm your team, like, we're on the same team. You know, it was like he was respecting the outside party more than the person that was working for him.
Mm.
And in this case, you know, I think he just had such a lack of self-awareness that he actually felt really bad. And he actually went in and advocated about me to like my boss, because I think he was worried that like I wasn't afraid to say something to him, and maybe I wouldn't be afraid to like say it to other people too. So I think part of it is I could have told myself a story about how he was going to react to me standing up to myself, to standing up to power, the power that he had over me. But I didn't. I didn't tell myself a story about what that could possibly look like, because what I was focusing on is what do I need to do for me? And is this something that I want to sweep under the rug? And I think that sometimes what we do is we decide, I'm going to sweep this under the rug, because all we've been doing for years and years is sweeping the shit under the rug, because that's how we've survived. And that's how we feel like we have to do things, because that's what works. And that's how people climb the corporate ladder, because they always say yes, and because they don't stand up to power. And I'm just getting on a goddamn soapbox now, because like, this is, but like, and I think that, and I think this comes down to the inner work, like you said, of if we don't acknowledge our own power, if we continue to hide ourselves and not believe that we're magical, and that we like what we say doesn't matter, then yeah, it's even harder to speak truth to power, because we're not standing in our own truth to be able to speak it. And look, I'm not saying it's going to look pretty every time. And I'm not saying your voice isn't going to quiver. And I'm not saying you're going to, who knows, you could probably throw up before you have the conversation, right? Because like, that's real vulnerability, real risk. But I think we've always been in the moment of time to need to do this. And it's even, to me, it's like even more critical, because people are listening more, or they can't get away with the same stuff, because people are like, oh, this can't work this way. Even when you look at what's going on with what Trump is proclaiming, and you even have like his own side of the party going, okay, well, we just can't, like, but, and that's the crescendo of it all, and that's an extreme. But I think it's also take advantage of the moment of time that we're in, and take advantage in terms of what is the work I need to do on myself, and take advantage to know that like things are different. And so the stories that you're telling yourself may actually not be true. They need to be questioned. Okay, I'm going to shut up now. I know I've been like on a rampage.
No, that was great. I mean, two things came up hearing you. Well, a bunch of things, but I think, well, okay, the first point I want to say is that, like, your story about talking to this boss and how you approached him, there's a lot in there that people can learn from. I also want to acknowledge that, does it suck that you have to do that? That you have to remind people that they can't treat you that way? Yeah, that sucks. Does that work fall more on women and people of color? Yes. And that sucks. And do we wish it was different? Yes. So just to acknowledge that work of teaching people how to be respectful, it's tiring. Like, it is real work, and it's mentally straining, and it's physically straining, and just acknowledge that, for one. And it reminded me of a story. So, and that work of coming into a conversation like that, not with, like you said, without a story about yourself, but also without a story about the other person that you're going
Right.
to talk to. So it reminds me of this story. A couple of years ago, I was newly dating a guy, and we were in a restaurant, and this young woman walked by, like, to go back to her table, and she was wearing a kind of, I don't remember exactly, but she was wearing like a little dress, and she was kind of, you know, prancing around. And to me, what I saw in that was like she was feeling good about herself and she was feeling sexy, right? The guy I was with said something like, he said something derogatory, that she was like teasing all the men in the room.
Ooh.
Yeah. And who was she to like be so, I forget exactly what he said, but that was the gist, right? Like that her action, the way he saw her actions were purposely arousing all of the men in the room. These kinds of things in the past, before I had done a lot of work on myself, you know, I would have exploded on him and been like, what the fuck are you talking about? This woman is just feeling good about herself. It's not about you, right? That would not have gone so well. He probably would not have, you know, he would have gotten mad, I would have gotten angry, and we would have just escalated. But I was able to, you know, take a deep breath and try to see what, like, put myself in his shoes, right? Try to see why he would think that. And I think part of his thing was conditioning, right? I mean, we've all heard those stories that that's what women do, that we're out to arouse men all the time, right? I think also for him, there was a piece of like, you know, for many men, you've seen an attractive woman, you maybe approached her at some point and were rejected. So then you build up this wall to protect yourself and feel like, you know, oh, she's just bad or slutty or whatever it is. Anyway, I tried to like see all that in the moment. And I just said in a very calm way, you know, what if that's not what she's doing? You know, what if she's like, what if it's her birthday and she's really feeling great about herself? You know, what if she just got a promotion at her job and she's just like, you know, yeah, I'm the shit. Like, what? And I think I did pose it as a question, like, what if you could, what if that was the truth? Right. And we wound up having a conversation, and he told me many times after that really shifted something important for him, that he had never thought of it that way. He had never, like, and once that idea came into his head, it made a lot of sense. Like, oh yeah, why? She's doing her thing, right? She's not, like, that doesn't really make sense that she'd be purposely spending her energy and time, you know, trying to control the feelings and reactions of all the men in a room. That doesn't really make any sense, right?
Right.
She's just living her life. So yeah, taking that time, and yeah, it took energy from my part. It took work on my part to stay calm and, you know, approach it from that angle. But then we were able to have a conversation, and he was able to shift his view.
I mean, that's everything. Like, I mean, that's such a great example of, like, we have to do the work on ourselves in order to make the changes, because we have to come from a centered place. We have to come from a sense of separating from ego, right? And thinking that and shaming others and blaming others, right? Like that yes, there are definitely truly evil people in the world. And I believe that people were conditioned the way they are for whatever they were experiencing, you know? And so how do we, like, bring to light a new way of thinking about things, or how do we do things in a way, like, you know, that can open somebody as opposed to close them? Because what, you know, by you asking the question, right, you were helping him remain open versus blaming, versus pointing the finger and all that stuff. Right. You know, I mean, and then
I could have just said, like, wow, you're so sexist. And that would shut it down. Or then he would have felt like he had to defend himself.
Right.
and it would have gone nowhere. Good.
Well, and to me, this is the difference between instant gratification and being willing to have the patience for the real lasting change. Because when we blow up and we react, like we're getting the instant gratification of feeling better for a split second, maybe a little bit longer. But then at the end of the day, you're going to have this hangover later and be like, ugh, I didn't like who I was. I didn't like going low with that other person,
Right.
And that's the challenge of going high. Going high is fucking harder than going low. Like it always is, right? Like, but that is the work, I think. And, tying it back to, we're talking about, right, our biggest dreams. And to me, like how we are in the world, who we're being, right? It can either help us to be our best selves and go after our biggest dreams, or we end up with dissonance about who we're being, and then we're hard on ourselves, and then there's this whole downward spiral because we're not being our best selves, and then it becomes harder to believe in ourselves, and it becomes harder to get out of the muck, because to live our best life, it's about rising above the muck, not being better than the muck, but saying I'm not going to let myself get stuck in that whirlpool of destruction,
Yeah, and then when you're stuck in the muck, and you've been stuck in the muck for years or decades, that's when you start hating on other people.
Right.
Because that feels good. Like you said, that'll feel good for a little while.
Yeah.
And it gives you a reason, oh, it's all their fault, right? Whoever the they is, if it's their fault that I feel shitty about myself and my life sucks all the time, that feels kind of good to the nervous system. It feels better than just sitting in the muck. At least it feels like you can have that connection with the group, right? You can be like, oh, I can join all these other people that hate those people.
I mean, yeah, because I think we have a tendency to want to blame other people for our situations versus look at ourselves and say well, what role am I playing in this? I think about some of the folks that just spew stuff on Facebook, right? They just spew the hate and spew the finger pointing. And it's what role do you have in your own misery right now? Yes, there's some really challenging stuff going on, but usually we can look at ourselves and say, well, what else can I do to positively impact this situation? And then that's calling back our power, I love this. I'm just going to show this comment that we have here from Dr. Len Chapman. Seriously have to get out of the muck. And it's so easy when that's what's being modeled. The muck is being modeled. It's being modeled as this is okay and this is how things get done. And then we can become that. If we're not careful, we can become the ones that we are pointing the finger at.
Yeah. I mean, I was writing the other day, I was inspired by, and this was probably a week or more ago, but, anywhere, whoever you are in the country right now, or not everyone, but so many of us, right, are doing this thing of them over there, right? They suck. Whoever it is, whether you're a liberal, progressive, Trump supporter, QAnon, whatever, we're all creating this, I'm okay over here and they suck over there. But if you look at what's underneath that, everybody is afraid. and angry.
Mm.
And that's true no matter what your beliefs are, no matter who you voted for, you're afraid and you're angry.
Mm.
You're afraid of different things than other people, right? And you're angry about different things, and you're expressing your anger, and you're taking action in different ways. And yes, we can argue about who's reacting more appropriately or blah, 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 blah. But the underneath is people are scared, people are angry, and so what do you do with that, right? Like you have to try to, it always comes back to people are, they're trying to find a way to feel safe. They're trying to find a way to belong, and they're trying to find a way to feel loved and appreciated by other people. And it's not serving us to always separate. It's right. It's not serving us in our country right now. It doesn't serve us in personal relationships, and it doesn't serve us in our careers. It just doesn't serve us. It can be fun, right? It can feel good for a while, but it's like, again, if we're looking at how do we live our best lives, it's just not going to serve us in the long run to do that.
Yeah, and I think, even if we took this down to like this fear-based, right, environment, the scarcity-based mentality that is rampant, and how it plays a role, again, coming back to like living our biggest dreams, right? Like going after our biggest dreams, that if we continue to be led by the fear, then yeah, like we won't take the risks. We won't take the leap of faith. We won't tell ourselves that anything is possible, because we're just constantly self-protecting, constantly, like limiting ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of, especially now, like when uncertainty is handed to us on a platter and we can see it more clearly than ever, it's easy to just be like, now's not the time to like go after my dream. Now's not the time. But how do we like address the fear mindset?
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to talk about that for a little bit, because of course, with my clients as a career coach, and I'm sure with you in relationships, right? Like fear plays a role in all of that. Like what are maybe some tools that we can give listeners to say, all right, like, how do you get out of that? So that you can move into an abundance mindset, or move into infinite possibility mindset, and be in a healthier place with it.
Yeah. Well, I love talking about that. So I can share a bunch of tools, and then I'd love to hear your tools that you share too and that you've used. I think one that I was actually talking with my friend the other day about is that's been really working for her, that I love, is, and we've touched on a little, is this idea of asking more and more questions in a situation. And we talked about it, right, with my story about the guy asking him the question. But I also, and then the idea of like, what's underneath it, right? What's underneath that? What's underneath that? So like you can really drill down with a fear. So for instance, like I'm buying land right now and designing a house for me and my kids to live in. So many people keep telling me, wow, that's so scary. Like, wow, aren't you scared? Aren't you afraid? Right. And I look at it in myself, because I'm like, I'm not really afraid. I don't know why. Why am I not afraid when other people are afraid? So I can ask that question, like, if I was talking to someone, I could say, what are you afraid of about that? Right. And maybe they say, I'm afraid that I would do it wrong. Okay, what does do it wrong mean, right? Like, I'm afraid I'd make a mistake and the whole house would fall down, right? Or would, like, something dramatic. And then you can ask that question, like, is that really a possibility, right? Like, is that really a likely scenario that the whole house is going to fall down? No, that's not really a likely scenario, right? I'm going to have a builder, I'm going to have a general contractor. People are like, I don't know how to build a house, but I will hire people to make smart decisions for me, right? So you just keep asking questions to try to dig into that fear mindset. Because the fear, most of our fears are actually coming from things that have happened to us in the past, right? And so recognizing that if you actually shine a light on them and question them, you'll start to see that they're not based in the reality that you're in now, that they're based from some previous scary experience that the person had. So and that feels kind of fun, that exercise of digging in and asking more questions and asking more questions. And then there's ones like we talked about, I think last time, of addressing the fear on a body somatic level, recognizing that our emotions do live in our body. And like you were talking about before going into that conversation, with your boss, I don't know if he was your boss, but someone in a position of power over you, that you might throw up, you get super jittery and nervous, right? Like that's because the fear, it's in our bodies, and our bodies are reacting. They react in particular ways to the fear. So if you want to really start building up a tolerance to scary things, then you can literally work on recognizing how fear feels in your body, and basically like meditating with the fear so that you become more comfortable. When the fear comes up in your body, you can start to feel more comfortable with it. You can talk to it. You can be like, okay, fear, I feel you. It's okay. We're safe. You can talk to it, tell it it's safe. You can physically comfort yourself, in those moments, just like you would a child who's afraid. You can start to play with bringing in joyful experience or experiences where you felt super safe and loved, so that you can start creating new neural connections, so that the fear, when it does come up, it doesn't feel so overwhelming. It feels like something that you can handle, or something that you can actually even start to enjoy, and turn it into excitement or turn it into pleasure when it comes up. Cool.
Yeah, I love all of those. Wow, what great tools for people. And something that came up for me was like personifying the voice of that fear, right? Like kind of in the inner critic work. And I often recommend to my clients this book, Taming Your Gremlins, which is just another word for inner critic, right? Which is like, who is that voice? Who is that voice that is telling you these things to be fearful of? Because sometimes it's not really our own truth speaking.
Right.
It's one thing, if like there is real imminent fear and it, and there's like gut instinct, and it's like, oh my God, like this person isn't good for me, or what, whatever that is. And it's another thing if it's like this voice, the thing that comes up for me, just on a personal note, like when coronavirus first hit, there was like this fear, as somebody who's, at higher risk because I'm type 1 diabetic, like there was this fear. And I was working with a coach and realized, gosh, that voice of fear actually wasn't my own. Like actually my true voice was like, I'm going to be okay. Like I'm actually not worried about my health. But the fear was coming from a very, someone in my life that embedded a lot of fear in me early on in my life. That was just like a constant worry wart, that like, everything was like doomsday and nothing was going to work out. But that's not me. That's not how I go through life. But I've carried a lot of that through my life because that fear-based mentality was planted early on. So I think that, again, getting quiet with ourselves and understanding, where does this voice come from? and yeah, like how can I see it, or how can I comfort and let it be heard?
Mm-hmm.
And just like, all right, let me just hear you out, because often we just kind of like, I just want to ignore that fear voice because I don't like, it feels bad, versus being like, all right, let me sit down with you today and let me hear what you have to say. Oh, you're afraid there's going to be another 4 years? All right, let's just really talk about what that looks like. Because I think even in this current environment, right? Like, so many people went into this like, like panic, like, oh my God. And like, I get it.
Mm-hmm.
And let's also look at that fear and say, well, what's real there?
Mm-hmm.
About, and look, I don't totally am not discrediting the fact that there is like, real, you know, uh like deaths that happen because certain people are in power, and there is a real life and death kind of element
Mm-hmm.
to who's been in power and what that means, and what that has meant to certain populations, for sure. So I don't want to discredit that, but and I also want to say that, like, there are um I think a lot of, again, stories that we tell ourselves about what it means if this is the outcome, or what does it mean if that is the outcome, and then we go into this like massive like fight or flight stage, because we've built this, we've let fear take over,
Mm-hmm.
versus say, okay, let me look at the facts,
Mm-hmm.
and if there were another 4 years of this, let me look at what the possibilities are, versus like what this part of my brain wants me to really believe. I don't know if that's like, making any sense to you as I'm like,
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And what comes up for me too is, um, I think there's a big misunderstanding that a lot of people have related to fear and related to emotions in general, which again is really about a story that we've all inherited and absorbed, which is that, fear, that certain emotions are the way we're supposed to feel, right? So, or that if we take fear as an example of a particular emotion, which makes a lot of sense, this story that I'm supposed to be afraid of, say, Trump, right? I'm supposed to be afraid of what 4 more years with Trump is. And like, if I, like that's the appropriate feeling. And what I'm trying to say is, you can feel afraid, and that makes sense. But you don't have to, right? Like, you can actually be more useful at fighting for what you believe in if you recognize that fear is just a feeling that you can move through, that it'll come and go, right? Like, you don't have to feel afraid in order to do useful work towards what you believe in. And I think a lot of people don't get that, right? Like, they think, I have to be afraid right now. Like, that's the appropriate response. Or
well,
I have to feel angry, or whatever it is, right? Like, it's emotions come and go. You're in charge, right? You can feel them, you can move through them, whatever it is, but feeling fear is not a prerequisite for actually like caring about the world or caring about politics, or, you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
yeah, no, it does. And I think some of it's like peer pressure. It's kind of like, oh, how are you not feeling afraid? And you could like this situation makes me think of when I was, in one of my roles, I had a new manager coming on, and that it was internal, and I started hearing all these stories about like this person was a nightmare. Like, oh my God, you're gonna have to work for so and so. Oh my, like, your life is gonna suck. Like, that's the kind of shit that I was hearing, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, like this, but what I did was I said to myself, I am going to withhold judgment that other people's experience with this person doesn't mean it has to be my experience. And holding space for what it could, holding space for the fact that I don't know what this is going to look like. Sure, I'm getting some information and some warning signs, like, you know, I might have to prepare myself for a challenging time, but that doesn't have to be, that I don't have to then go into that relationship with all my armor because I've been told to fear this boss, you know? And like, that was a choice that I had to, like, succumb to other people's experiences, to succumb to like this planting of fear, and whether or not, and look, it was a very challenging boss, you know, I'm not gonna lie. But if I went into that relationship, if I started that relationship on my heels, on my back, you know, like this versus like, who are you? You know, then our relationship dynamic could have been different than it was. You know, and so part of it is well, how do you want to, like, enter a situation? From what place? Like, what is the value that you want to lead with? What is the mindset that you want to lead with? Even though it might be really hard, right? Even though, like, I am over here wanting to, like, get my game face on and, like, you can't mess with me because, like, I know about you. You know what I'm saying? Like, I could have done that like, easily, you know, but I went into it going, like, who is this person? You know, and those are very different energies, and people respond to that. Whoever, you know, whatever their tendencies are, that the relationship that you're going to have with a person, with an organization, is uniquely yours. And it's not a story that's already been written. So don't write this story before it's happened. You know, that kind of, that's kind of what came up for me as you were sharing that.
Yeah, and fear is really not a helpful, it, you know, you can decide to be active, you can decide to move forward with hope and with love, you know, even when you're fighting, you know, the hardest fight in your life, it will actually be easier,
right?
And you'll be like, it'll be easier on you, like on your physical, emotional body, to go into a scary situation from a place of hope and love than fear. And if you're trying to reach a particular outcome, that's the whole point, right? Like, you can choose what energy you bring, what's driving you. You can choose your motivation.
Yeah, it's kind of like self-fulfilling prophecy. It's kind of like, you know, you manifest what you think about, or, you know, all of these sayings, you know, but there is truth in the energy that you put out, right? It will mirror the energy that you get back. You know, and I just encourage people that might be watching to see, to observe that in your life, to see, is that true for you? Because we, you know, from the spiritual perspective, you know, that I know we both have very strong spiritual beliefs and practices, that this is one of those things where we can say, how does this mentality, like, really prove out in my life or not? You know, and then say, okay, what do I want to experiment with to see if then the opposite can be true? You know, if it's, of course, if you are putting out good juju and you're getting back good juju, keep doing that. You know, but if you keep saying, okay, oh, what energy was I in when I wrote that email to my colleague? And if you were resentful and you were pissed off, what did you end up getting back? Regardless of what your words said in that email, right? Versus the time where you didn't write back right away when you were triggered and you waited until the next day and you had a more zen energy, you had a little bit more of a heart opening energy. And then what came back to you? You know, because those are the types of things that do make a difference. And those are the types of things that make a difference in terms of like how you see the results that you want to see. Because going after, again, coming back to like going after our biggest dreams, in my opinion, when you're feeling stuck, is coming back to what habits do I have that are not serving me? Where do I keep getting in the cycle? And some of this stuff are great things to look at. Where am I led by fear? Where am I putting bad, like shitty juju out there that I'm not getting back like anything good? You know, those are they're the big things, but the small things that can unlock our, you know, our ability to really make progress on going after our dreams. Is my 2 cents. I don't know what you have, what thoughts you have on that, or if not, or if there's something else that came up for you.
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree. And I think another piece that comes up is recognizing that it's when you put good juju out there, as you say, some people are gonna really fucking hate you for it. And they're gonna get really reactive to it. And so that is a place that you can stumble also, or get blocked and let fear take over. And start getting even in the mindset of like, oh my God, what am I doing wrong if I'm saying things and people are reacting really strongly, right? So I want to touch on that. It was interesting in my, you know, for me personally, it's happened in the past couple of years, well, I guess the past year. So when my book came out, Choose Love, right? And then I started posting my, you know, now my business is called Choose Love Revolution. And I would post things, whatever, different things. Every once in a while, I would write something and people would respond to me with, well, that's not choosing love. You're clearly not choosing love if you're saying that. And yeah, I mean, I get very like sensitive to that, and I get all like, oh God, people are hating me. You know, I get very uncomfortable when I think people don't like me, or think that I'm a bad person. That's like a deep one for me. And so I have to, and I still have to, you know, I have to really do a couple things when those situations happen. So one is, like you said, like question, what am I putting out there? You know, look at, okay, was I speaking from a place of love? Because, you know, of course I don't always, right? I'm not Buddha. So being able to acknowledge that, oh yeah, I posted that, whatever I posted on Facebook, that was totally not from a place of love. They were right to respond to it, even though it hurts. Like I can acknowledge my failures, acknowledge my mistakes, and try to do better, right? And learn from them. So that's a big part of it, you know, recognizing that it's, and taking responsibility for my own mistakes, my own speaking from anger, or speaking, you know, without thinking, or whatever it is. And then also a big part of it is looking at, you know, a little bit looking at what's underneath what that person is saying to me, right? And sometimes getting in a conversation with them, you know, to ask them, why are you so mad about what I said? You know, what is it in you that, like, what did I trigger in you that made you so angry or made you want to be mean to me, you know? And not always, like, I'm not going to always spend my time doing that with people, but there can be a lot to learn in those conversations too. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I think it's funny because what, it makes me think of like, conversation I have with my husband, it's like he says stuff and like, because of my, past, because of our past, all that stuff, like it triggers me. And he'll tell me, you just automatically thought that I was talking smack about whatever. And like, I really wasn't. I was just complimenting you. You know what I mean? Like, it's like I have this tendency to be like, everything is a backhanded compliment. You know what I mean? Like, and so, yeah, like I have to be willing to get clarity. Like so much of, I think, what you talked about is really just getting clarity and understanding with the people that we're interacting with. And that is not something that we do. We want to go right to the assumption. We want to go right to the storytelling. And we don't want to be like, well, what did you really mean by that? Really? Because then people don't realize, oh, yeah, no, that's, this is how it came off, but this is really what I meant, or this was what was really behind it, or actually what happened is my dog really pissed me off this morning, and like whatever, and that's the patience. Like that's the, sometimes I think about that we're in this, like everybody has to be super productive, right? Like, but productivity, that's the age of industrialism and all that stuff, right? Like that's what things are measured by. And because of that, I think that the humanity gets shoved to the bottom of the list and to the bottom of the priorities. And that's why we have toxic workplaces. And that's why we have toxic environments. That's why you have toxic government, all that stuff. But what if, and I've had to do this myself, what if my focus wasn't on just shooting that email out and getting out what I have to say? What if it was, how are you doing today? What if it was like seeking understanding before wanting to be understood, like that mentality? What if it was honoring there's a human on the other end of these communications, whether it's in person, whether it's virtual, whether it's email, and we might have a much deeper understanding of each other and get out of the muck that we've been talking about, because we're not taking the time to go deeper.
Yeah, and I think, that's a big part of why you and I decided to do this and why we want to do this, and get people asking questions and interacting, because I think a big part of it is our social media that's set up to not have conversation, right? It's set up for someone to blab out their view, whether it's on a video or an Instagram post, like, this is my view. That's not a conversation.
Right.
And if someone gets triggered by it, then they just write back, well, this is my view. And again, like, there's no conversation there. And it ruins us. I mean, it really does, because like you said, and we are all humans, right? Yeah. We all want the same things. We want to feel safe. We want to feel loved. And I'm not saying that there aren't people that take those needs of feeling safe and feeling loved and do horrible things all over the planet. I know that that is real. And I'm not saying that any of that's okay and that you have to love those people. But there's a lot of gray, right? Like, we can't just throw out millions of people and say they're evil because there are a few evil people, right? I mean, we can, and people do, but I'd rather not, I'd rather be able to find a common humanity with people. because that makes me feel safer. You know, I'd rather feel like I have things in common with all sorts of people all over the world, because it makes me feel better. It makes me feel better about humanity and about the future for my kids and all of that. You know, it reminds me of this, I will share one more story before we finish our hour.
Yeah.
Way back when I was like, I think I was 16, and I spent a summer in one of those like pre-college programs at Bennington College for the summer. And it was a time, so if I was, whatever, it was like mid-90s, there was something going on in politics where there was a bill, you know, I'm going to get really vague, I'm really bad with history, but there was some anti-abortion bill that was about to get passed in the federal courts. And so my friends and I organized a rally, a pro-choice rally in the town of Bennington. And there was a woman, a young girl, like another 16-year-old who was pro-life, and she organized a counter protest. And we had our little protest, and you know, we were on one side of the street and she was on the other with her people and blah blah blah. Anyway, afterwards, somehow, I don't remember because it was a long time ago, somehow she and I got to talk, and we wound up having an actual conversation where we weren't just yelling and spewing each other's views, right? And what it came down to was that she believed with her whole heart that the second that a baby was conceived, a fetus was conceived, that it was a human, that it was a baby. And she explained it to me as that, right? Like, you can't kill a baby. And when I heard her say it in that way, I was like, you're right. If I believed that, if I believed a fetus was a baby from the moment it was conceived, I would be anti-choice too, right? Because I don't like killing babies. I like babies, but I don't fundamentally believe that, right? I just, at my core, I don't fundamentally believe that a fetus that can't survive out of a woman's body is a baby. And she just fundamentally does. And we're never going to convince each other to believe anything else. But she was able to understand why, like, I was able to explain my views in a way that she understood, and she was able to explain her beliefs in a way that I understood. And so we came away from it with not a love for each other, you know, not a like, we're going to work together for the future of humanity. No, but we didn't hate each other. You know, I didn't think she was evil. She didn't think I was evil. And that was it. Like, we were able to just come to a recognition of humanity and a respect for each other, you know, like a basic respect, which is, if we could all have that right now.
Amen. Cheers. Cheers to that.
We need like 5 more people, right? Doesn't have to be everybody, but just a few more.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's happened over the past 4 or 5 years is that our tolerance and our patience for having actual conversations and sharing opinions without shaming or blaming, I think we've lost that.
Yeah.
You know, I think there was conversations in the beginning, and then it was just like, and then it just got really ugly. And like and it's like the art of the conversation, like we have to get back to that. We have to get back to like, it can be different. It can look different to engage. We have to be willing to try. We have to be willing to open ourselves back up. We have to be willing to be wrong for the sake of bringing humanity back, you know, and I think that goes in every realm and in every part of our lives. And I think we even started this conversation with, right, the art of the conversation. like, yeah, it's not a freaking tweet world. It's not 140 characters that we're going to be able to have a legitimate conversation in, like, let's learn the art of conversation again so that we can dream again, and we can allow the best side of ourselves to shine. That's just, I guess that's my hope for this Friday.
Yeah. So we can start to live from a place of hope and power rather than fear. And we're just fear and fear.
Yeah, fear and fear.
Yeah.
Well, I know we're coming to the top of the hour here, and I've just been loving like this collaboration, these conversations, and I know that whoever is watching and will watch as we post this will take some nuggets away, for sure. And again, just share again, like what kinds of work you do, because I shared a little bit, I think, in the beginning, but let's remind our viewers like who we are and how we can support them as we enter a new phase. Whatever happens, we are still entering a new chapter of this nation's history.
So I am a relationship and love coach, and I create workshops, and I do one-on-one coaching, and I write a lot about these topics. And I work on creating tools and sharing tools and my thoughts and what I've figured out in my life and for my clients to help feel safe and feel trusting and accepted in ourselves, so that we can come from that stability and that place of peace in order to fulfill our biggest dreams in our careers, have the best relationships we can have, and pursue justice, in our world on a deep, powerful level. That's really important to me as an activist. I've always been an activist, and seeing more and more the connection between what we do for ourselves internally and how that allows us to be out in the world and make a change in the world, make a difference in the world. So that's really what I love working with people on. There's my website, Choose Love Revolution. And we'll be back next Friday to talk more. And if people have questions, right, as they're listening to or watching the replay, they can come back, right? You can come back next Friday and ask the questions, or you can post questions in our LinkedIn profiles and we'll answer them next time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we love to get questions. I know this has been a hairy week, and it's just people are in a different headspace, but we'd love to address whatever's coming up for people. So, well, looks like it's going to be a beautiful weekend here in New York area. So I hope we can take advantage of letting the sun shine on our faces, and breathe a little bit easier.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Margot, and look forward to the same time, same channel next week on Seeking Utopia.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks, my dear.
Take care. Thank you. And thank you for those who joined and will join after the fact.